So, hello, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. So you guys can see my screen?
Yeah, we can see your screen. Yeah.
Okay, just a sec. All right, okay. So I'll not be sharing my video because of the connection issues probably. So thank you everyone for joining the session today. My name is Fahad Ahmad, and I'm currently working in one of the power utilities sector in the Middle East as the Deputy Manager OT Cybersecurity Training and Workforce Development. I'll be today talking about the cybersecurity cultural transformation in the OT and ICS environment. So normally when we talk about the cybersecurity, we look at the people, process, and technology part, right? Um, and from experiences and from the rising cybersecurity threats over the period of time, what we have seen is that the irrespective of whatever technologies or whatever the processes you have in place, eventually organizations become compromised, right? So I start forward by one of my favorite quotations from the book, The Art of War. It's from Sun Tzu. And it says, if you know the enemy and you know yourself, you need not to fear the results of the 100 battles. So now if you put this quotation in the paradigm of cybersecurity, we would realize that, we as a cybersecurity experts, it's extremely important and crucial for us to understand who our enemy is, what are the threat vectors to our organization, whether it's IT or OT. And we also need to know about the capabilities that we have. So the capabilities would be with regards to the people that we have, how trained they are, what are the skills and capabilities, along with what specific technologies do we have, what are the risks we are addressing, covering those technologies, and how optimized processes we are using within our organization. So now looking at knowing the enemy, this is, if you look at the map on the left-hand side, so this is one of the publications from Kaspersky, where it demonstrates the percentage of the ICS or the OT computers that have been attacked only in the first half of 2019. So if you look at it, the map, you could see the maximum red coverage is there, which shows that majorly almost all the big countries have faced cybersecurity attacks on the industrial control systems. And on the right-hand side, if you look at the cost of the cybercrime, the damages that have been happening, it was predicted that in 2015, the amount was around $3 trillion, and it was predicted to rise almost double, which is $6 trillion. So from these statistics, along with the map coverage, we can clearly see that there is an extremely influx of cybersecurity attacks, whether it's IT environment or the OT environment. Moving ahead, so when we talk about the threats to the OT environment in particular, the first and the foremost is the poor security controls or the processes. So this is where you either have no security controls in place, or the security controls that you have implemented are not adequate enough. Second is the internal threats, which are accidental. So this reminds me, one of the publication I've read, that it mentioned that almost around 65% of the attacks or the issues that arise within the OTS or the ICS environment is mostly because of the misconfigurations. So normally what people do is they are pushing the configurations to the production, but I mean, it doesn't harm if you just look at the configurations twice, considering what would be the impact if there is an issue or a mistake within that configuration on the safety, availability, integrity, and the confidentiality of the OT environment. And also due to the non-compliance to the security policies. Then third, we have the virus, worms, and Trojans. We all know what these are. Then we have internal threats which are intentional. We understand, like, I mean, there could be cases where we have unhappy employee who has a malicious or bad intent, and obviously they would do a deliberate attempt to harm the environment. Then we have unprotected devices. These are the devices with less security controls in place. We have external threats, which are the supply chain and partners. We have seen recently very famous examples. SolarWinds is one. Second was the Log4j. So these are some of the classical examples of the supply chain attacks. Lack of user awareness. I mean, this is something that's pretty straightforward. Everybody knows, and organizations are taking this pretty much seriously. I've seen a massive increase in the organizational understanding and emphasis in getting their resources trained and aware about what would be the threats and what could be the possible implications. Phishing attacks, we know this is where, we always say it's the first or single point of entry in any organization. So phishing attacks is one, then ransomware, and then of course the external threats, which are attackers or external countries or the state-sponsored attacks that are happening on the critical infrastructure. So these are almost around 10 threat vectors that are impacting the OT cybersecurity industry. So this is all about knowing about your enemies. Now, when we talk about knowing ourselves, the traditional approach to addressing these threats is the people, process, and technology. And most of the focus is primarily on the technological part. And then due to the compliance and the legal obligations, the second priority goes to the processes. And lastly, we are having some emphasis on the people part because unfortunately, organizations see the cybersecurity trainings or investment in the resources as a potential expense. They don't see it as a potential investment would actually help them to mitigate, the cost that they're going to put in terms of the risk mitigation actions. Now, how to address this is to ensure we have a cyber resilience culture. So when we talk about the cyber resilience culture, how can we achieve a cyber resilience culture within our organization? So in order to achieve that, we need to make sure we need to have people talking the same language, working on a common objective to improve and enhance business continuity, operations, and resiliency. There is a famous saying that says, bird of a feather flock together. So, I mean, people with similar interests and the similar mindset actually go along well with each other. And that's something that's very common. So, and as I said, so people means people of similar type, interest, personality, character, or other distinctive attributes tend to mutually associate, which we normally see in our day-to-day routine. There are some people we easily get friends with, and there are some which we don't get along with well, right? So now one can argue that not all people are the same. So that's the reality. So if we look at the organization, there is a diversity in terms of culture. We have people coming from different countries. They have a different background. They have a different thought process. And if you put one single problem in front of the group of people, you would see people addressing them the same problem in all different manners altogether. So this is one of the very famous or viral, I would say, an image that shows there was a hen that was placed with the ducks. And when we talk about the culture, so when the hen looks at the ducks and she sees that everybody else around me is doing the same action, so they are walking on 2 feet. So the hen started walking like the ducks. So this is, if we relate this to the cybersecurity culture. So if your organization has a strong cybersecurity resilience foundational culture in place, so if you are onboarding new staff members to your organization, with time, all the new staff members would actually try to replicate and resonate with the current culture of your organization. And that's how the culture development takes place. And that's the main objective, to instill the cyber resilience culture within the organization. So people drive cybersecurity culture. And when we talk about the cybersecurity culture, so these are some of the traditional initiatives, what we see in the industry. So normally what I have seen from my experiences as well. So at max, what organizations would have is a monthly security awareness sessions. I mean, there are cases like for huge organizations, it is monthly awareness sessions because they want to cover maximum number of the people. But if you look around the organization or any other organization, you would see that the frequency of the security awareness sessions is pretty minimal. And then at best, what we could do is once or twice a year, organizations conduct phishing awareness sessions or the campaign or the assessment to identify the readiness of their staff against the phishing attacks. Then the third we have seen is the fancy technical cybersecurity training. So, we know all the big names in the cybersecurity trainings. And to be honest, there are some of the trainings and some of the training vendors which people love to associate with them just because of their name tag or because of their pricing, right? So this is also one of the factors when it comes to the cybersecurity culture initiatives from the organizations. And lastly, at the best, what we could do is organizations celebrating November as an InfoSec month, right? So they would do some small kind of workshop, some kind of awareness sessions, celebrating November as Information Security Month, reviving or refreshing the concepts of awareness. So from my experience, what I've seen is, so if you look at all these initiatives, what's happening within the organizations over the period of time, when you start all these initiatives, you would see a gradual increase in terms of people getting the awareness. They are being educated. They realize, okay, cybersecurity threats are real, and what could be the implications. But eventually, what happens is, over the course of time, this initiatives, all these initiatives, the output of those becomes level out, and gradually they start declining because it's the same material, same content that we are delivering over and over again, and people start getting bored of it, and then they see it as an additional responsibility over their head in terms of delivering the sessions, or they are bound to deliver the sessions while they have some critical office work in place. So what's the problem? So the problem is we are not actually focusing on the basic human psychology. So we have, as I told you, we have the initiatives in place, but those initiatives are not helping us as an organization to develop the cyber resiliency culture because we are not focusing on the basic human psychology. So what's the basic human psychology? So it's a reward and accountability mechanism. So humans have the tendency to either follow or do certain actions because they would be awarded, they would get some benefit out of it, or if they don't do a certain action that they are responsible to perform, then they will be held accountable for that. So it's a fear factor and then a reward factor. That what drives human emotions and drive human initiatives. So when we talk about the reward mechanism, this is one of the classical examples. We have seen scientists giving multiple demonstrations of different animals and different birds all together, where those animals or birds are trained to perform a certain act, and as a reward, they get something out of it. So for example, take an example of this image with, excuse me. So we have a parrot, right? So the parrot is trained to scare away the monkey. And if the parrot scares away the monkey, as a reward, the parrot gets a cookie. So this is a reward mechanism. And similarly, we have an accountability mechanism in place. So if you look at it, there is a car that's crossing the red line. And obviously what's going to happen is, eventually, you will get, as a punishment, you'll get the tickets, fine tickets, or you would get black points, or both, right? So this could happen. So either people do things or perform certain actions because either there is a reward element there, or there is an accountability mechanism that's there. Now we have seen what's the basic human psychology and how we can drive them. So now let's try to translate into what is actually happening within our organizations. So if you look at the left-hand side, while we all know that the cybersecurity strategic objectives and activities revolve around improving the businesses, however, what is communicated to the users is maximum the business risk, the controls they need to put in place. There are certain technological projects that involve people, process, and technology. There are certain milestones, some deadlines, SLAs, or KPIs. So if you look at it, people would look at these things as a responsibility, as an official responsibility that they need to work along and comply with. But what is not communicated that actually drives the culture is what's the role of each department that help address the risk, and what are the potential benefits of implementing these controls to the business. And most importantly, as people, So what would be the impact of these actions on the department and as a person? So people are not able to relate with themselves or with their department that what is the benefit that their department is doing, what is the outcome. They don't see the outcome, they only see some of the controls that they need to put in place. Secondly, business simply means money coming in. It simply means dollars, right? Which ensures continuation of services and reward. Third, we have organizations can continue to deliver value and create impact in the society. So if you look at big or mature organizations, you would see they engage their employees or departments into many volunteer activities. The reason is so the people could actually relate if they perform certain actions, how they would impact the society, right? How they would impact the people around them. What's the value addition? What's the contribution they are doing it? Then fourth, we have investment in employees in terms of training, salaries, raise, and bonuses. So obviously, if the business is growing and if people know that there are certain actions will actually help organization to grow, the company in return would actually invest in the employees in terms of training, salary raises, and bonuses. And obviously, lastly, we see the financial growth of the company may result in employees obtaining percentage of shares and other benefits, like example, retirement fund, etc. Right. So what's the takeaway? To communicate. And what do we need to communicate? At all levels, whether it's end users, mid-level management, or the senior level management, we need to communicate the risk at each levels. The risk should not be communicated to a certain department or to a certain managerial staff, while the end users who are working in the IT or OT organizations or they're working in the fields, they are not aware what the actually risks are. And if they perform any kind of actions, what could be the potential implications? Communicate business implications of any decision they make. So irrespective, it's a senior management or it's an end user that is taking a day-to-day decision in their daily official routines, they need to understand what would be the business implications. So for example, if an OT engineer working on the control center or working on the engineering workstation and is trying to push a configuration in the protection relays, and if he's not just cautious about the thresholds, so it can seriously damage the OT environment or equipment, right? And then lastly, the reward and accountability mechanism. So this is one of the key areas which I've seen. So I've seen companies that are communicating risks to a certain, a group of people or department or a senior level staff. I have seen organizations stressing about the business implications again on the level of the decision makers, but not on the bottom level on each staff, what they are doing on day-to-day basis. Especially when it becomes to OT environment, it becomes very critical. And then I've yet to see organizations that are actually focusing on the reward and accountability mechanism. And this is the last piece. This is the actual piece that actually helps you instill the cyber resilience culture within your organization. So now I'll just go down quickly into the reward mechanism objectives. So the objective is to encourage people to participate. Humans by nature are very lazy and try to resist change or leave their comfort zone. So what's the best way to motivate people is tie the KPIs to attend and pass the security awareness training. So normally organizations are doing the awareness trainings, but in order to make sure you get value out of it, you are transforming the culture. You need to tie those KPIs to the people's annual appraisals, maybe, right? So for example, 100% participation in the awareness sessions and 80% passing score for all the awareness sessions that are happening in the organization. And achieve a certain level of score during the phishing assessment. So if there are any annual phishing assessments, around 80% of the simulation exercises, the employee should actually be able to pass those, right? So that's a score that they need to attain. And eventually, you can start with a lower score and eventually gradually increase depending on how aware your resources are. Monitor cybersecurity practices for employees. This is a very key point. So for example, no audit observations against an employee for poor cybersecurity practices. This may include no password sharing with the peers, not sharing access control card with other colleagues, not involved in tailgating or shoulder surfing activities, not writing passwords or screens or under the keyboards. So if you look at all these, initiatives or the KPIs that I've mentioned. So these can be tied to the employee performance review appraisal. So for example, if somebody is getting promoted or annually the organization is reviewing the employee performance, they just don't look at what are the projects they have done, how successfully they have delivered the projects. It's not just the business risk or the controls that they are looking at, but also should tie these to these indicators, because these indicators would actually transform your organizational culture. And if you are doing this part, you are embedding secure practices as part of your processes, which eventually will allow you to have a more resilient cybersecurity culture. Just quick examples of a few examples for the reward mechanism. So at the user level, you could go, for example, certificates as employee of the year. If the employee, for example, attends 4 user awareness sessions and score 100% in the assessments, you could go, the gift vouchers to the employees if they're attending 3 awareness sessions and scoring above 80%, for example. Especially in the Middle East, it's very important facility to have a covered parking, especially during summers. So if somebody is attending, for example, 4 awareness sessions and the score is above 70%, you give, for example, 1 month of free covered parking as a goodwill gesture. On a departmental level, you could go, different trophies, different certificates. For example, department with the highest passing score, department with the highest participation rate, department with no audit findings, and department with highest accurately reported incidents. So another step, what you could do in addition is to ensure that the departmental SLA ensures 100% participation of all users for security awareness trainings in a year or a quarter. So this is one of the key KPIs that I actually emphasize on while working in any of the organization, because when we talk about the controls and enforcement of any control, it always comes down from top to bottom. So if we enforce the KPIs on the departmental level, they will be automatically cascaded at each user level. And to ensure that the departmental SLA ensures covering 70% of the passing score for any security assessment training. So again, these percentages are only for reference. Again, it comes down to your organization, how ready they are in terms of the knowledge and skill set they have. Okay, so the final words is communicate risk at all levels. Again, communicate business implications of all actions, not just the top management or only the decision makers, because decision makers are making decisions on a higher level. However, if you look at each and every day official activities, users are performing actions that have serious business implications. A simple example is an end user that is clicking on a phishing email, or somebody who is doing password sharing. So these are the people who are working on the ground and doing simple activities, but if they are not careful, it would have serious implications on the business. And lastly, as I mentioned, reward and accountability mechanism. Make sure you have that in place. I've listed down a couple of KPIs. I have mentioned out the methodology that you could list or just link those KPIs with the annual review system that you have within your organization. And also I've mentioned about different the benefits that you can provide to the customer, to the end users, along with on the department level, like the certificates, trophies, etc. So that's all from my side. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fahad. And guys, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat